Hey Bass Fanatics, welcome back to Fish Den 365. Before we get started with today's video, I just wanted to appeal to you for a call to action. If you like these videos, please subscribe, hit that like button, feel free to share with your friends, and make sure you give me your feedback with your comments. It's really appreciated. I thank you all for watching. Today we're going to be talking about bass fishing in spring. We're going to talk a little bit more about one of my favorite baits to throw this time of year, which is a swim jig, and why that is. You know, right now in Pennsylvania where I live, the waters are warming up. There's one thing that's driving all of the behavior for bass, and it's the spawn. Now, the fish aren't spawning yet. The water's too cold for that, but it won't be long. And what drives their behavior right now is the need to feed up in order to have the energy to spawn. So both the males and the females are moving shallow right now. And in the video that I'll be showing you shortly, you'll see that some of the fish were right next to the bank that I caught. In fact, on the first fish catch and the second fish catch, those fish were actually feeding on the bank. The first one I heard break the surface chasing bait. That was a real little fish, but you never know when that fish is going to be a 12-incher or a 6-pounder. So you know when you see that activity, it always helps to throw in there and try and catch that fish. And in fact, the fourth fish that's on the video did the same thing. It was a much better quality fish. I caught them both on the swim jig, this very one right here, and it was because of what I call situational awareness. And that's another video that I talked about that I made for you to take a look at if you're interested. I'll put a link right above me here so that you can take a look at that video. It's how to improve your own usage of your senses to understand and see what's happening in your environment, and it leads to a lot of more opportunities to catch fish. And there's two great examples in the upcoming video where you'll see that I catch fish right against the bank because I was aware that they came in there and were feeding on bluegills actually. So as I stated, the fish, there's more and more waves of fish moving shallow now. They're feeding up. We're going to have a warm spell next week. It's cool and rainy again today, but next week it's going to warm up into the 80s, and it'll be the first consistent warm up that we've had. And I expect that that'll start some of the spawning behavior. Some of the early fish will start spawning probably next week. I believe the moon phase is correct for this also. The moon does guide fish behavior, bass behavior. A full and a new moon is generally when they will spawn or be on their strongest urge to spawn. So that will be coming soon. But in the meantime, we have an opportunity to catch these big fish. They're fat this time of year. The females are full of eggs, and they're the fattest and heaviest bass that you're going to catch all year because of just the nature of the bass. So this is a good time to begin to use a larger lure. In this particular case, I've upped the size of my trailer from 3.8 inches to 4.8. So this is a Kitech Swing Impact Fat 4.8 inch trailer. I've upped the size because I'm trying to appeal to more fish. The water's warming up now, so they're getting more active. They're going to be more willing to chase. And these big females especially like a bigger meal. So I've been throwing this jig in the last couple outings and doing quite well with it. I really like this swim jig. This is a Dirty Jigs Finesse swim jig. As the summer approaches, I'll go to a standard swim jig, a standard Dirty Jig swim jig. It's a little heavier and the skirt is a bit more bulky than this. But at this time of year, I really like the Finesse one, and the hook has got plenty of strength. I don't bend the hooks out. The rod I'm using, I want to share this with you. I usually don't talk too much about rods and reels, and that's because I'm trying to appeal to people who already are fishing and they already know what works for them. But it is important to talk about the action of the rods for the specific technique that you're doing. So we'll start talking about that more and more in upcoming videos. So the rod that I really like to throw this swim jig on is a Boyd Duckett Terex rod. It's a 7-foot medium heavy, and it has just the right action to throw these jigs a long way. I can throw this thing a country mile. It's 3/8 of an ounce, I believe, and I could really wing it out there. And it just has the right taper to it to get a good hook set on the fish. You've seen me catch a lot of fish now if you've been watching my videos on these swim jigs. And you're going to see me catch quite a bit more in this video today. I haven't lost a single fish, and part of that is because I'm using the right setup. I have I've upgraded now because I'm going for larger fish from 15-pound fluorocarbon to 20-pound test fluorocarbon line. That's the leader that I'm using. I always use a leader about 7 to 8 foot, and I like fishing braid. The reason why I like braid on my reel is because braid transmits what's happening so much better. There's no stretch in it, and so therefore you have a much better feel for what's happening at the end of your line. But that fluoro leader is important because you don't want the fish to see the braid. It's easy to see by the fish, so having a fluorocarbon leader like this, they can't see it, and it's 20-pound test, so it's plenty strong for the application, and it's just the right setup. I fish a 7-foot rod because I'm not a very tall person. Anything more than 7 foot becomes a little unwieldy for me, becomes a little uncomfortable for me. I will fish a 7.5-foot rod when I'm flipping, but that's about as long a rod as I'll go with. Taller people may prefer 7'3", 7.5" for this application. For me, a 7-foot rod is perfect for what I'm doing. And this Duckett rod is probably in the $100 to $120 range, something like that. You can probably get this rod between $100 and $120. So it's a very good rod for the price point. It's very sensitive, it's quite light, and I really like it for this particular technique, and you don't break the bank with the rod. I also have a Fluger reel on this rod. This is an old Tryon. I've had this for many years. I have several Fluger reels and I have several Shimano reels. And these are bait casters that I'm specifically talking about right now. The Shimano reel that I like the most is the Curado. It's a great reel. Fluger makes a very good reel also, and it's very similar to the Curado. It's a little heavier, but it's just as reliable. I've had these Fluger reels now for over 10 years, and I've been fishing them hard, and they work very well. Same thing with the Shimanos. They're incredibly reliable also. But I like both reels, and depending on if I feel that I want a lighter reel, that's when I'll go with your Curado. If I don't mind a little more weight in the reel, sometimes it's actually better, then I'll fish the Fluger reels. Both I find to be very reliable. This is a 6.3 to 1 gear ratio, so it's somewhere in that mid-range. It's not super fast, it's not super slow. Again, it's perfect for fishing this type of bait. These swim jigs, I just want to spend a little more time talking about it. I know I have a couple other videos where where I've been fishing this now in recent weeks. But this thing is a very versatile bait because you can fish it a number of ways. You can swim it along like you'd swim a spinner bait, but you could also stop it. You could also just throw it out there and just let it go to the bottom, and this tail just has this very enticing wag to it, I'll call it. And so you can do a lot of things with this bait, and for those who are familiar with my channel, you know that I like baits that can do more than one thing, what I call hybrid baits. So this has the qualities of a jig, but it also has the qualities of a swimming bait, like a spinner bait. So you can do both things with it, and it allows me to be more efficient and to cover more water more quickly. So what's happening now is, the next time I go out, hopefully it'll be early next week when we have some warmer weather with the sun shining, I'll probably go to Lake Nakamixon. And what I'll be doing is covering a lot of water because I expect that more and more bass are going to be moving shallow. And so I'll be running along with a bait like this, or a spinner bait, or a square bill crankbait, and just throwing it out in shallow water, covering water near the banks because the fish are moving up to the banks now. It's a fun time of year to fish. It's a fun way to fish. And this bait has been working, so I'll certainly be using this a large percentage of the time. So in the video that I'm going to be showing in just a minute or two, I want you to notice something. There's something in common to all the fish catches that I do in this video. It's not the bait. The bait is a common denominator, but it's the way I'm fishing the bait. So I'd like for you to take a look at what I'm doing and then comment on what you're seeing. Comment if you realize that I'm catching a fish doing a certain thing, a certain method of retrieving the bait. And at the end of this video, I'll come back and explain exactly what I was doing and how important it is. sure hope they get bigger than that. Fish here. Pretty one. fish. Got him. Yep, there was one there. There was one there, for sure. Good fish. That's really fascinating. Okay. Alright. Alright, buddy. Gotcha. Not a bad one. Pretty fish. They're in really good shape in here. Really, really pretty. Really nice shaped fish. Very nice. He was shallow. He was shallow. Right where he should have been, where this current break is. Okay, so we're back, and the one thing that I hope that you noticed when I caught the fish was that I was varying my retrieve. I would reel this in for several turns of the reel handle, and then oftentimes I would stop, or I might speed up a little bit. I might start slow and speed up and then stop. The key is varying the retrieve. And in fact, in the video, there were at one point 2 guys fishing next to me, and they weren't throwing the swim jig, but they were throwing this swim bait, this very swim bait, 4.8 inch. And they, most people know innately that varying your retrieve tends to trigger more bites, but oftentimes people forget when they're on the water. So I was out there and I caught 3-4 bass, and these guys were watching me catch those fish, and they were throwing a bait that should have been catching them too. It just they just weren't using the jig. They were just using the swim bait, and yet they weren't catching any. And they were commenting like, why is that guy catching them over there? Why aren't we? And I was looking at what they were doing, and they were throwing their bait out there and just reeling it back. Never changing the retrieve. Throwing it out, reeling it back. And then finally, towards the end of the evening, he did catch one. But they could have caught so much more if they would have varied the retrieve. And I'm not saying that a steady retrieve doesn't work. Sometimes it's the only way to catch a fish. For example, if you're fishing a wake bait, this is a topwater lure that just makes a wake on the surface, that steady retrieve is critical because it makes that wake, and oftentimes it looks like an injured bait fish, and the fish will come up and slam that. So there's a time and a place for a steady retrieve. But more often than not, you'll trigger a lot more bites by varying the retrieve when you're casting and retrieving it back. And the reason for that is sometimes this bait in particular, fish will lock into the bait and they'll start to follow it. And as soon as it does something different, whether that's speeding up or stop, and so you kind of kill your retrieve and then it kind of flutters down, that's a triggering point for a bass. So that triggers an instinct that's deep within that fish's psyche to go and attack it. And so that's how you catch a lot more fish. You vary the retrieves. And yet, this is a very basic thing in fishing. And yet, over and over again, I go out and I see people, they're not doing it. And then they wonder why they're not catching as many fish. So be aware of that in your fishing. Make sure that when you're throwing a bait like this, that you're at least experimenting, right? So every day is a little different. Sometimes they might just want a straight retrieve and they might want to just lock in, zone in on it, and grab it. But more often than not, I think you'll find that when you vary that retrieve, when you stop and go, when you have it going at a certain pace and all of a sudden speed it up or kill it, that's when they crush it. And if you watch the video carefully that you just saw, you'll notice that's where I was getting my bites, especially when I would stop it, just a momentarily pause and then start again. That's oftentimes when the bite would take place. And this is another recommendation for everyone watching. When you watch fishing videos, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's the pros on TV, watch what they're doing with their hands. Most people are, they want to see the fish caught and they're watching the fish and seeing the fish on the end of the line, and that's fine. But if you want to learn how they're triggering those fish to bite, watch what they're doing right here. Watch what they're doing with their hands, how they're retrieving, what they're doing with the rod. Are they imparting some kind of special action into the bait? People, especially at the professional level, are extremely proficient at finding ways to get fish to bite, finding ways to trigger bites, and they do it with what's happening right here with their hands. So if you're watching videos like that and you see a lot of fish being caught, watch what's happening here, because that'll help you interpret what's happening, and therefore you'll be able to duplicate it on the waters that you fish. So now that we're coming into some warmer weeks, the beginning of May will be next week, we're going to have the opportunity to catch fish in more ways. One of those ways is going to be top water. Eventually that water will warm up enough so that you can catch them on top water. So I may do a video on how to catch bass in this time of the year on top water. If you have an interest in that, please comment. The other thing that I've been considering doing in some of my future videos is how to fish pressured lakes, because where I am, there's a lot of lakes that are heavily pressured, and you do want to approach those types of situations a little differently versus lakes that are less pressured. Please comment if you have an interest in that. And then at some point I will certainly do another video, an opposite video, of how to find waters that produce great fishing that are not pressured, and that's why they produce great fishing, and how to find those kind of honey holes and how to fish them. And if you have an interest in that, please comment. But if you want to get an idea for what pressure does and how it affects fishing, find a place, find a location that has a lot of bass in it that really doesn't get fished. I've been fortunate enough here to be able to get access to a couple of quarries that are nearby my home that are loaded with bass, and they don't get fished because they're gated, they're fenced off, they're private. And when I fish those quarries, it's amazing how willing those bass are at biting. They'll eat anything, almost anything you throw at them. So it's kind of a neat thing, because if you can find waters like that, public waters that aren't fished very much, you can catch bass in so many more different ways. And it's a good way, when you find those kind of waters, to practice new techniques, because you can learn very quickly what works and what doesn't. There's plenty of bass that are willing to eat. You can learn what triggers them, and then you can apply that to the more pressured waters that you fish. So it's a great way to learn new techniques. Bass fishing is so amazing in that there are just so many different ways to catch a bass, and they all have their time and place. You wouldn't throw a top water generally in the winter when the water's very cold, for example. But boy, coming up in spring and summer and fall, it can be a dynamite lure. And there's just so many other applications. Soft plastics, you've got crankbaits, you got lipless crankbaits, you got spinner baits, you have wake baits, you have glide baits, you have chatter baits, jigs, soft plastics of all different shapes and sizes. And so there's just so many ways to catch bass, and it takes time to learn all these different methods. And yet, in order to be a more rounded fisherman and a better fisherman, it does really help to learn a lot of these different techniques. Some techniques are better suited for certain environments, certain lakes than others. And it's important to learn and understand that. But once you become well-rounded, you can go to any water, anywhere, and based on your experience, kind of figure out what's likely to work, and then go about catching some really nice fish. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video and picked up some good information. Hopefully there's something that you can utilize to improve your fishing. Remember, we're certified Bassified. We're all about the art and science of bass fishing, with a little bit of fun thrown in now and then with some of our videos. And I look forward to putting another video out very shortly. We're doing at least 2 videos a week, in many cases 3 videos a week. So lock it back to the channel here. Make sure you hit that notification bell so that you can be notified when another video comes out. And subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, share with your friends, and please feel free to comment. And I look forward to putting out the next video very soon. May God bless your fishing endeavors.